If we want to save the planet, we need to change what we put on the table and how we produce food.
Some good news, possibly, if we get rid of red meats in our diet, if we move towards vegan lifestyles, if we change how we're using the land, we might be able to reverse that damage, but the clock is ticking.
Either the world ends or we all become vegan.
Hey everybody, this is Klaus from Plant-Based News. Animal agriculture is now responsible for 87% of greenhouse gas emissions, according to a new study by Stanford-educated systems engineer Dr. Sailesh Rao.
The paper looks at the impact of animal agriculture and shows that it is responsible for 87% of greenhouse gas emissions on an annual basis. In the past, we've had different estimates, one from the UNFAO at 18%, and then Goodland and Anhang at 51%, and then UNFAO then reinterpreted their work and made it 14.5%.
But why is the UN's 2006 18% figure and the World Watch Institute's 2009 51% figure so wildly different? Apparently for two reasons.
They had used the breathing contribution of animal respiration, and they had also used a 20-year time frame for calculating methane emissions. And both those were kind of controversial in some circles, especially in the animal industry circles.
Despite the scientific controversy of the inclusion of respiration, he noticed that one key factor was missed out of all of the reports.
So what we did in this paper was said, okay, let's ignore respiration, but let's just look at the opportunity cost of the land use. Basically, we looked at bringing back forests, bringing back the original forests that used to be there on that land. The overall impact of cutting down all these trees and not letting them come back is on the order of over 30 gigatons of CO2. So it was about 5 tons per person. So we took existing grasslands, grazing lands, and we replaced it with original forests wherever there were forests in 1800, because we have data from 1800. So in the model, we just replaced each grid with a forest grid and just added up the numbers. It's not that complicated, right? And that itself was enough to reverse climate change.
The opportunity cost of lost forests in determining accurate greenhouse gas emissions turned out to be such a huge factor, but it became apparent that there are even greater forces at play.
The way science works is that scientists ask questions and they answer them. And you get funded for asking questions. So those who fund science can determine what questions get asked and what questions never get asked. And so there is a fundamental bias in science about not asking questions that would rock the boat. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is supposed to be the organization that's putting together the science from different fields and then coming up with the recommendations to governments. But the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change was relying on the UNFAO for all of its agriculture data. And the UNFAO has a public partnership with the International Meat Secretariat, the International Dairy Federation, the International Poultry Council, the International Egg Commission. I mean, they're all there in that partnership, which is right there on the website. They even show you. These are all the partners. And it's called the Livestock Environmental Assessment and Performance Partnership, LEAP partnership. The job of the partnership is to figure out how to calculate the impact of livestock appropriately so that the livestock industry flourishes. It's like the Tobacco Institute, and asking them, is cigarette smoking harmful? And they'll say, of course not. They even have papers telling you that smoking Marlboro Lights will heal lung cancer.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because when people think of climate change, the first thing that springs to mind isn't animal agriculture, even though the facts are so clear because of documentaries like Cowspiracy and studies like the one we talked about. But the interesting thing is that even if the Paris Climate Agreement's targets were met, this would do nothing to actually reverse global warming. It will just slow the progression.
Mainstream media focuses on climate change. Why? Because they're telling a story of fossil fuels. They're telling a story of clean energy. So that requires the economy to grow. That requires capitalism to still flourish, right? So it's about making money doing electric cars or solar panels and wind energy, as opposed to changing our entire lifestyle, changing our relationship with nature, changing our relationship with the earth, which is what will happen when you discover that animal agriculture is actually the leading cause of climate change also. Because animal agriculture is the leading cause of species extinction, of ocean dead zones, of every other environmental we know. But they were framing that it's not the leading cause of climate change.
Anyway, the 87% paper that's been peer-reviewed and published recently really does hammer home the point about the deleterious effects of animal agriculture on our climate, and this needs to be a wake-up call to all of us. So please share this video if you can, and I'll see you very soon for some more plant-based news.